Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brandon always believed that his marriage to Melissa would withstand any crisis. They had been together for 8 years, and he saw the wear and tear between them as a common phase, the kind every couple faces at some point. Even when their conversations started losing intensity and their gazes no longer carried the same sparkle they once did, he convinced himself that everything would soon fall back into place. He worked more than he should, spending hours on end in the office, focused on reports and goals, believing the problem was there, in the exhaustion, in the routine, in the weight of responsibilities. That night, Brandon was at the company immersed in numbers and graphs, trying to finish a report that needed to be delivered by morning. The clock showed a late hour, but he insisted on pushing forward, believing that keeping his mind busy was the best way to maintain calm. However, the sudden sound of a message on his phone interrupted his concentration. He looked at the screen, expecting something trivial, but when he opened the message, his entire body tensed up. The words were few, but the impact was immediate. Melissa had written, "I need you now. It's urgent. Please, come to this address." There were no explanations, no justifications. Just the dry and direct sentence, accompanied by an unfamiliar address. At that moment, Brandon's heart raced in a strange way, a mix of fear and concern, as if something inside him already knew that the message carried more than a simple request for help. He left the report on the table and grabbed his car keys without thinking twice. As he drove through the almost deserted streets, his mind felt like a battlefield. He thought about everything that could have happened. He imagined an accident, a health issue, maybe some kind of threat. He wondered if Melissa had gotten herself into danger, if someone was forcing her to act that way. Each hypothesis that came to mind was worse than the last. When he finally arrived at the address, he felt an odd chill in his stomach. It was a discreet hotel, the kind that few notice, hidden among old buildings in the city center. For a few seconds, he stayed in the car, looking at the entrance of the place, not understanding what Melissa would be doing there. His mind refused to accept any possibility outside the norm, clinging to innocent explanations. Still, he got out of the car. He walked to the reception, but the receptionist simply pointed to the stairs, as if he already knew who Brandon was and who he was looking for. Without questioning, Brandon followed the directions and went up to the indicated floor. With each step, his breathing grew heavier. His hands trembled, and his heart felt like an offbeat drum inside his chest. When he reached the hallway, he saw the door to the room slightly ajar, as if someone had left it that way on purpose. The silence was almost absolute, making everything even more suffocating. He stopped in front of the door, trying to find the courage to go in, but curiosity and fear mixed in a way that prevented him from backing away. He pushed the door open carefully, and what he saw made him freeze. There was Melissa, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face hidden in her hands, crying uncontrollably. Her breathing was broken by sobs, and the despair consuming her body was evident. Next to her, a man sat with his head down, as if wishing he could disappear at that moment. The scene was suffocating, but Brandon kept his gaze fixed, trying to understand what was happening there. When Melissa noticed he had entered the room, she immediately lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her face swollen from crying, and her expression was one of pure desperation. She stood up impulsively and said she needed him more than ever. Her voice trembled, the words came out rushed, as if everything inside her was about to explode. She said everything had spiraled out of control, that nothing was as it seemed, and that only he could fix the situation. Brandon remained motionless, observing every gesture, every word, unable to process what he was hearing. At that moment, he realized his life was about to change forever, but he still didn't know that the wounds about to be opened would never heal. Brandon continued standing, feeling the weight of everything his eyes saw, as if his own body had forgotten how to react. Melissa, in front of him, seemed even more distressed. The words stumbled out, as if she were trying to reach for something impossible. The sobs interrupted her sentences, but she persisted, saying that things had gotten out of hand and that he was the only person who could resolve it. He kept his gaze fixed, attentive to every detail. His mind, however, was already starting to build answers to questions he didn't even know he'd ask. And then the man next to her moved and lifted his face, revealing a truth Brandon could never have imagined, even in his cruelest assumptions during the drive there. It was Tyler. His younger brother. The shock was brutal. Brandon lost his breath for a few seconds, as if he had taken a heavy blow to the chest. Tyler, his face drenched in shame, didn't try to justify himself. He just kept his head down, like someone who already knew there was nothing left to say. Melissa collapsed to her knees in front of Brandon, begging him to listen. Between tears, she repeated that everything had started innocently. She explained that she had sought Tyler as a friend, looking for someone to confide in about the marriage, about the daily silences, about the emotional distance that was consuming her from within. Gradually, their conversations became more frequent. She said that at first, she believed she was just finding someone who listened, someone who offered understanding and a little attention. She said the messages became more frequent, and before she realized it, she was too deeply involved to pull back. Brandon remained silent, absorbing every word. It was as if his mind couldn't process everything clearly. As she spoke, each sentence felt like a knife cutting new wounds in his chest. He knew those conversations she mentioned weren't as innocent as she tried to describe. Melissa, attempting to explain, revealed that everything happened during a moment of vulnerability. She insisted she never intended to cross any lines, but when she realized it, she was already too entangled to retreat. Tyler, who had remained silent, finally decided to speak. His voice was low, raspy, as if carrying stones in his throat. He said he was destroyed inside, that he had no excuses, and that he never wanted to hurt his brother. He confessed that he also felt trapped in that situation, as if he had fallen into something he couldn't escape. As they poured out their versions of events, Brandon didn't utter a single word. He was there, standing, but his mind was elsewhere, wandering between childhood memories with Tyler and the early years with Melissa. Each memory felt like bitter irony in light of what was happening there. What hurt him most wasn't the fact that he had been betrayed. It was the weight of seeing two people he loved most in the world begging for forgiveness at the same time, as if the love they had destroyed could somehow be repaired in that pathetic scene. Melissa held his hands tightly, as if trying to prevent him from disappearing. She cried even harder, swearing everything had been a terrible mistake, that she never wanted it to happen. She said she was desperate, that she felt shame, guilt, and regret, but that she needed him at that moment. Brandon remained silent. His eyes scanned each face, as if searching for traces of the people who had once been essential parts of his life. Inside, he felt something dying, yet he still stayed there, absorbing every detail, because part of him wanted to hear every last fragment of that confession. Melissa, through tears, revealed that the real reason she had called Brandon there hadn't yet been said. She stated that she needed to share something that would change everything all at once. In that instant, the atmosphere in the room became even more suffocating, as if every second stretched in agony. Brandon knew, deep down, that there were still hidden wounds about to open. He remained motionless, his heart beating like an untamed drum, waiting for the next sentence that, once again, would change everything around him. Brandon stayed there, immobile, as if his body no longer belonged to him. Melissa's words seemed to echo from a distant place, but each syllable hit his chest with the force of a storm. She clutched his hands desperately, pleading for him to have the courage to hear what still needed to be said. It was as if she knew that this last secret had the power to shatter any remaining resistance he still carried. She took a deep breath, searching for strength that already seemed depleted, and then spoke, her voice breaking, about something she had been hiding from everyone. She said that a few days ago, she had discovered something that had thrown her into panic, and despite trying to handle it alone, she could no longer bear the weight of the uncertainty. She stared at Brandon as if trying to find in his eyes a final trace of compassion, even after everything that had already been exposed. The words came out almost in a whisper, but they were enough to cut through the air in the room. Melissa revealed that she was pregnant. Brandon felt his whole body tremble at that statement. Her hands shook so much that they could barely maintain their grip on his. She continued, explaining that she still didn't know who the father was. The silence that enveloped the room was devastating. Tyler, who until that moment had been looking down, raised his gaze, his expression filled with shock and remorse. He said there was no way to be sure, as her encounters with Tyler had occurred during the same period she had been trying, almost desperately, to rekindle her marriage with Brandon. She said that amidst the chaos she herself had created, she could no longer distinguish where the mistake had begun or where everything had spiraled out of control. Her confession was one blow after another. Brandon absorbed it all, without making a sound. It was as if every sentence she uttered tore another piece of his soul away. He remembered recent moments when she had seemed more affectionate, when she had tried to seek something in him that no longer existed between them. Now, all those memories felt like disguised traps, threads of a farce that was now crumbling before him. Melissa kept talking, even through tears, saying that her intention had never been to hurt him this way, that she herself was living a nightmare upon discovering the pregnancy. She said fear consumed her, that she didn't know how to carry this uncertainty, and that she had only called Brandon there because she believed that, despite everything, he deserved to hear the truth from her lips. Tyler, for his part, kept repeating, almost choking on the words, that all of this was also his fault, that he had failed as a brother, as a person, as a human being. He confessed that he never imagined the reckless choices of this story would have such serious consequences, that he too was lost, unsure how to face his own reflection in the mirror. As Melissa begged for some sign of reaction, Brandon found himself drowning in a sea of memories. He thought about family dinners, birthday parties, Christmases when the three of them were together, smiling, as if nothing could shake that bond. All those scenes took on a new meaning now. Everything seemed like an act that had gone on for too long, a farce he had never suspected. Melissa's voice grew increasingly desperate. She said she wasn't seeking forgiveness, but she needed to share this burden, as the weight was already crushing her. She admitted she had lost sleep, spending nights awake wondering what would happen if the test revealed the worst. She said she no longer knew how to face herself in the mirror, that her conscience had driven her to rock bottom. Tyler, his face overcome with remorse, said he didn't want to run from the consequences, that he would accept any decision Brandon made. He said that if he was the father of the child, he would take full responsibility, but at the same time, he admitted that the idea of seeing his brother ruined destroyed him even more. Brandon, faced with this avalanche of confessions, remained motionless. There was no rush to respond. There were no words that could cover the magnitude of the wound that had been opened there. He simply stayed, absorbing every detail, like someone who knew that after that night, everything he had known as life would cease to exist forever. He observed the two of them, without haste, as they sank deeper into their own guilt, waiting for an ending that still seemed too far away to arrive. Until that moment, Brandon had maintained a calmness he didn't fully understand. Hearing his wife confess a betrayal with his own brother was cruel enough. But knowing that she was carrying a child and didn't even know who the father was destroyed any restraint that still remained within him. Blood surged with such force that his body acted on impulse. Without thinking, he lunged at Tyler, grabbing him by the neck with both hands and slamming him against the wall with such fury that everything around him seemed to vanish. Melissa's screams cut through the air, pleading for Brandon to stop, trying to pull his arms away, but he didn't hear her. It was as if his body was feeding off the anger, all the accumulated pain finally overflowing. He looked at his brother as if he wanted to rip every drop of remorse out by force, squeezing tighter and tighter, watching Tyler's face lose color. During that moment, something unexpected happened. Tyler's eyes met his, and there was something strange in them. Brandon saw his gaze, still and unresisting. There was surrender. It was as if Tyler wanted this, as if he wished for Brandon to unleash all his pain with his bare hands. There was remorse, there was guilt, but above all, there was a kind of silent plea for punishment, as if physical retribution was the only way to ease the weight he carried. Brandon noticed this. He realized that if he continued, he would be doing exactly what Tyler wanted, serving as an outlet to relieve that rotten conscience. His hand still trembled with rage, but he released Tyler's neck, letting him collapse without offering any support. He turned to Melissa, who was sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. She tried to approach him, but he raised his hand, signaling for her to stay where she was. Brandon's gaze was sharp. Without changing his tone, he said it was over. There was no more room for conversation, no more room for tears. He looked her straight in the eyes and said with certainty that he was absolutely sure the child wasn't his. Then, addressing both of them, he said they would have to figure it out themselves. Without adding another word, he turned and walked out the door. As he descended the stairs, Melissa's screams echoed, but he ignored them. Each step he left behind seemed to lift a bit of the weight he carried in his chest. When he stepped out the main door of the hotel, he felt an intense relief, as if he had freed himself from chains that had bound him for years. For the first time, he breathed like someone who knew he was free. He returned home, his mind still boiling. As soon as he arrived, he went straight to the bedroom, opened the closet, and grabbed some suitcases. He threw in the clothes he would need, documents, personal items, and everything else essential for the coming days. He didn't want explanations, much less goodbyes. He grabbed the car keys again and left, without looking back. He headed straight to the office. It was the only place where he felt safe. There, he dropped the suitcases in a random corner, turned off the lights, and collapsed onto the couch. He lay there, his body exhausted, his heart still racing, his mind numb from everything he had experienced. He knew sleep wouldn't come, but that hardly mattered. He closed his eyes, just to shut the world out for a few moments. The next day, still with a heavy head, he contacted a lawyer he had hired in the past to handle business matters. He scheduled an immediate meeting, and as soon as the appointment was confirmed, he went there. During the conversation, he recounted everything directly, without delving into unnecessary details. He said he wanted a divorce, with no chance of reconciliation, and asked the lawyer to handle everything so the separation would be as quick and definitive as possible. The following months were a slow but inevitable process. The hearings dragged on, and each meeting brought up memories he preferred to forget, but he remained steadfast. During this time, Melissa and Tyler decided to conduct a test, still during the pregnancy, to confirm paternity. It was a safe test that posed no risk to the baby, and the result was definitive: the child was Tyler's. Brandon received the news without surprise. It was as if, from the beginning, he had already known. That confirmation merely sealed something he already carried as an absolute truth. When the divorce was officially finalized, he had already made another decision. He put his company up for sale, transferred his assets, and began the process of moving everything to another state. He sold the house, set the apartment aside, and organized his move to a place where no one knew him, where he could start over far from all the faces that marked his history. He disappeared from the city without leaving a trace. No message, no goodbye. He simply vanished. He knew he couldn't live surrounded by memories. He wouldn't be able to walk the same streets, frequent the same places, knowing that his brother, now the father of a child conceived with his ex-wife, lived there too. Time passed, and even with the confirmation of paternity, Melissa and Tyler went their separate ways. She didn't want to continue with him, despite the child. That was yet another consequence of everything that had already fallen apart. Far away, Brandon found something he had been searching for a long time. It wasn't happiness, nor immediate satisfaction. It was peace. Peace in knowing that although he had lost so much, he had gained something far greater: the freedom to live without carrying the weight of betrayal, without dragging himself through unresolved stories. He knew that episode would never be forgotten. But he learned that some wounds aren't meant to be healed. They're meant to teach. Some pains don't need relief. They just need distance. And at that moment, he understood that that night hadn't marked the end of his story. On the contrary, it was the beginning of the life he had always deserved. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.